And we're back. In this video, we're going to be talking a little bit more about these primitives that we played with in the last video, and give you a few more settings that'll make working with them a little bit easier. I've got a plane here in my viewport, and as you can see, planes are flat plane. They're invisible on one side, so you see as I flip this over, you can't see the other side. That's going to be something we're going to be dealing with more and more now as we start making these models, as which direction those normals are facing. So we'll deal with that. We also are going to make a few boxes, so if you get your Mac set up so that you can go to Create, Geometry, Standard Primitives, where we were before, we're going to be dragging out objects, similar to what we did in the last video. So let's talk about all these objects now that we get here in Standard Primitives. Box we already played with, if you remember. Sphere we played with. Cylinder. Made a cylinder before. And again, all I'm doing is clicking and I'm left dragging, letting go of the left mouse button and pushing up with my mouse, and I just keep doing that until I make the object. Here's a torus, like a jelly donut. A teapot. Yes, it is a teapot. We'll come back to that guy in a second. Cone. A geosphere, which is just going to look like a sphere here until we turn on our edge faces. This is a tube. A pyramid. It's just like the cone was. And then the plane, if I drag it out, you'll see that's just a flat plane. So that's all of these standard primitives right here. I'm going to go back now and go into each one in a little bit more detail. I'm going to reset this scene. I'm going to go here to my perspective viewport. So remember, hit that to maximize viewport toggle, or right click over here and hit perspective or P in your on your keyboard. Okay, let's talk about these. So the one thing we're going to have to get used to doing is setting up our viewport so we can see what's going on with these primitives. And by default, it's going to be set up to realistic shading. What we want is realistic with edge faces. We mentioned that before. So it should say realistic plus to edge faces. You won't see any difference here, but you see when I drag out, say, a sphere, the next one in line, if I turn off edged faces on this, and I don't have it selected, you'll see that we really can't see what's going on with that object's segments, or the parts that make up the object. If I put edge faces on, you can see those there. Now when I highlight it, you can see it, but what we want is we want to be able to see those when it's not highlighted. And you'll see it in the color of the object there. You'll see those segments. So let's deal with these two now and kind of practice some setting of our segments. I'm going to click on the box. You'll see now that those settings we had before that were down here under Create, Geometry, Standard Primitives, there used to be a bunch of numbers down here. They're not there anymore. They always move to the Modify tab, which is the next one over. It looks like a little bent blue pipe or something up here. There they are. So just remember that your primitives, I'll drag out another box so you can see that. See those numbers right there? Those are the segments. See how I can add different segments to this? Well, those segments become very important. We also get some minor controls here to change the width and the height, but we've already done that. Now, when I click on another object, so I right-clicked over here on an empty spot because I'm getting ready to select another object, and now go back to the box. See how these have disappeared? They've moved over here to the Modify panel. The easy way to remember that is just always click on the Modify panel and they'll be right there. So here's our sphere, and you can see I can change the segment so I can make my sphere much more angular. We zoom in on that guy there. What we'll end up with is something that's a lot easier to see. There we go. So see those angles? Well, we may not want those. We may want them. We may want to make that shape. The more segments you have, the bendier something can be, or the smoother it can be. It's an easy way to remember it. And we need those segments so when we start modeling, we'll be able to see those segments. Okay, so what I'm going to do is make a few more objects here so we can see them. I'm also going to get rid of the grid. That's the G button. The grid is this thing right there. Get rid of that. All right, so under cylinder, there's a few things that we want to pay attention to. There is height segments. You can see those. We don't need a lot of height segments usually. Our cap segments, watch this area right here. That's going to give us some geometry on top of the cylinder and the sides. So these buttons down here for smoothing, slice on, all of these, those are things that you can play with if you like. Slice on's kind of fun. Makes pie charts is what it does. Also makes Pac-Mans. I won't make the Pac-Man sound. I'll save you from that. We'll turn off slice on. Generate mapping coordinates will be here for all of your primitive objects. And that one we probably just want to leave on. We haven't talked about mapping coordinates, but we will soon. And real world map size isn't really going to affect us here for a while, so we'll leave that alone. We'll go to torus. There we go. I'm going to move my sphere out of the way here, or my cylinder. So torus, we can do a couple other things here. We can change the radius, so we can make these very small hoop-like objects. That's usually what I use it for. We can also change the radius here, the outer radius, inner radius. We can, I'm going to go back to rotation and twist in a second. We can change the segments, and I can change the segments on this to be really pretty low. So something like this, now we'll go back to twist, and you'll see that I can twist that to make like a braid or kind of a screw type object. So I'm going to put twist back to 0. You can also type the numbers in and hit enter if you want. Oh, by the way, one thing, when you're hitting these little sliders, don't click on them. Just hold down the left mouse button and move the mouse up and down. It's much faster. You got some smoothing options. We haven't talked much about smoothing yet, so we'll come back to it. You also got a slice on. This one's easy to forget, that you can make bent objects with your tube here. So I could do something like that with my tube and get a bent, or with my torus and get a bent tube. Okay, I'm going to turn slice on off. We'll leave that guy alone for a second. We'll go to the next one. There is a teapot. The only thing you need to know about the teapot right offhand, it is there for a reason, and that's to be able to show shaders on all different types of surfaces, curved surfaces. So think of it as a French curve when we get into the shaders. Beyond that, it was the first object that was ever made in 3D, and I think it was made at Utah University, if I remember right. And it actually looked, the real teapot looked more like that. Yeah, a little bit of history there for you. Other than that, you can get into the teapot if you really want to, and you can turn off all these different parts. So you can say something like that lid, and that lid will make nice tank parts, believe it or not, things like that. But it's up to you if you want to use it. So I'm going to delete our teapot because he's not too important right now. We've got a cone. Again, the cone's nice for spikes, pointy things. I don't tend to use it too much. It has the same features that you saw on the other ones here if you want to play with it. You can change the sides on it to, you can change the sides to make a lower poly version if you want. So going back over here, the geosphere, now that we can see our wireframes, you can see that the geosphere has a very different wireframe. We usually don't like the geosphere. He's made up of triangles, and this one is made up of quads. We like quads here in the game development world. Not triangles, so we don't usually use that. But I will show you, if I go to my front viewport, see how the spheres are laying below this the surface or the plane that's here, my grid? I can change that by clicking on each one and just saying base to pivot. And it is in both sphere and geosphere. It is also in, I thought it was. I was going to say it's also in torus, but it is not. Okay, so it is not in torus. But now those are sitting on our make-believe plane there. Tube, very helpful in that I can make a hollow tube. Don't use a hollow tube for things like pipes if you can't see in them. We don't want these interior polygons built into our objects if we don't need them, but it's useful for things like tank turret guns or well, anything you need to see into, I guess. Primitive, or pyramid, not primitive. So we've got a pyramid. Pyramid's probably the simplest one in that you really don't get a lot to it. You can see that there's some segments I can make here. It's all making triangles. It's not particularly helpful. Of course, by default, it's made out of triangles. I can add height segments. I can also make exactly the same object with the pyramid that I can with the cone. So I tend to forget pyramid is there. I just use cone, and then you just put the sides down to say 4. Another thing we should mention is that blurry gray smudging that's going on is completely normal. That's your smoothing groups. And can't cover everything yet here in the early videos. We will get to the smoothing groups, but for the time being, when you see that smudgy black around your objects, just live with it for a few more videos and we'll get to it when we get to smoothing groups. Alright, and the last one is plane. And if I drag out a plane here and position it, all of our objects should be on the plane. If I put my grid back, it will always create all these objects on that grid. So if I go to the front view, you can see that black line is my 0 coordinate. That's where the plane is here. This one here is your other coordinate. So if I spin this around in orthographic view, you see we're sitting right on that plane. You can hit G to get rid of the grid. P will put us back in perspective from orthographic view. And we have made some primitives. So not a lot to the primitives. The only thing that really will be important to carry over here is remembering which primitives are available, and then also remembering to set your segments and learning how to control those. So that's going to do it for this video. I will be back in the next video, and I will see you over there.